Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Hello.
Well, thank you all for being here this morning. My name is Eli Cepeda. I am the Studio 210 Residency Manager, and I'm here with our Studio 210 Winter 2025 residents and mentor, Deborah Slater. This conversation is part of our Studio 210 residency, which provides resident artists space, time, and mentorship to develop and explore new performance material. Today will be an exciting look into the creative process of our two artists, which will culminate in a performance on Friday, July 26th and Saturday, July 27th, both in person at Studio 210 in San Francisco and live streamed via YouTube. The ticket link will be in the chat. So I'd like to first turn it over to our mentor, Deborah Slater, before I introduce our residents. Deb, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Deborah Slater, and we've been running the residency program for 14 years at this point. And this summer residency is yet another wonderful experience because I get to learn from all these amazing people who pass through it. And I've had a company for 36 years and the studio for 42, numbers that are astonishing even to me. And we have a show coming up in September. And that's, I think, all the news at the moment.
Thank you. So now I'd like to introduce our two summer residents. We have Clary Evangelo, and Janesta Edmonds. Would you please introduce yourselves to our viewers today and tell us a little about yourselves as artists and your artistic practice? Whoever wants to take it away first. How about Clary?
Awesome. Hi, good morning. I'm Clary Evangelo or Evangelio. And yeah, my practice right now for the last year or so has centered a lot around contact improvisation and emergent composition. And right now I'm specifically researching practices, performance as it relates to those things, and also neurodivergence and my experience with that, and other things I like to geek out about, like neurophysiology and ecological psychology. Yeah, that's where I'm coming from this summer. Pass to Janesta.
Hi, everyone. My name is Janesta Edmonds. And yeah, I would say that within the last 2 or 3 years, my art practice has been focused on re-ritualizing performance and dance through cultural excavation and exploration, and also utilizing multidisciplinary art forms such as dance, movement, poetry, storytelling, and the like.
Thank you. So I was really excited, obviously, when I got to see your submissions for the residency, and one of the things that really struck me was sort of this ritual aspect to what both of you have proposed in doing in your work. So could you share with us a little bit more about what you're working on, particularly for this residency? Maybe we can just continue in the same order.
Yeah, so for this residency, I'm deepening research that I began a couple months ago that's sort of about crafting and exploring scores and tasks that give like shape or some type of external expression of like internal experiences that I have. And it's kind of going in a different direction because a lot of more like sort of general questions are coming out of that research about just being human and with people in space, and also how the audience is included in that and sort of the general performance ecology that happens. So Yeah, I'm dealing with those questions. Right now, it's still very muddy, this process and how it's going to work with the people I'm working with this summer, because it feels very different with each group of people I work with, like what happens in improvisation or in an emergent composition. Um, yeah, I think I'll end it there, and I'll probably have more to say later.
Um, I think for this residency and what I've been proposing is I've been wanting to work with and build upon an idea based off the etymology of the word bless, which means to consecrate with blood. And I've been kind of drawing upon different aspects of West African ritual, as well as sort of like a Christian first Sunday where, you know, you take the blood, you drink the blood of Christ and you take the body of Christ. Um, and kind of like utilizing those ritualistic rites to sort of question and push up against patriarchy in religious settings and in ritual, and also honoring divine femininity through exploring womb space and heart space connection. Yeah.
Thank you both. Yeah, I think it's very striking that, Claire, you're working on a very tangible feelings, you know, kind of making your inner life very tangible for our audience and for those experiencing it. And Janesta, you're working on this sort of more spiritual kind of realm. I think that's an interesting kind of dichotomy we have going so far. Deb, please feel free to chime in with any questions or observations that you have, especially now that you've gotten a chance to work with Clary and Janesta for a little bit.
I think one of the things that's really been enjoyable and remarkable about them is that they're both intellectuals. They have a very thoughtful way of approaching what they're doing, and the conversations are very different because of their aims, but they're both I don't even have quite the words to describe it. It is my intellectual falling apart here, but it's been really the conversations are deep and very interesting about how you go about doing what you do. And I think that has been a very interesting experience. It's not always that way. Sometimes it's just practical conversation. Sometimes it's about how you fund things or how you deal with a recalcitrant performer. I mean, the conversations range all over the place in terms of how you make work. But they share, both of them are very smart people. And there's a really interesting intellectual component to what they're doing that I really enjoy.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. I'll take this moment to speak to our live audience on YouTube. If you have any questions, any questions for our residents, please put them in the chat on YouTube, and our residents will get a chance to speak to them a little bit later in our conversation. So coming back to the residency in particular, I know that you both have sort of a different vision of what your outcome will be from this. So I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about what you've found useful in your process. Are there any new insights that have come to you from the residency? And at this point, what do you want the audience to come away with? Do you even know that yet?
Yeah, I think the most valuable thing I feel like is always mentorship and having the opportunity to like speak frustrations or fears or like concerns out, like just put them out there, and then just yeah, Deb has been very, very helpful with helping me think through things that I feel like get so overwhelming I can't think about the process anymore. So that's always so it's just really valuable and really helpful. And I think also just having the time, it like puts puts a thought process in a frame of 2 months where even if I'm not in the studio as much as I thought I would be, or there's all these scheduling issues with people I'm working with, having a delineated amount of time to be thinking about something that I care about really deeply. I think just the frame of being in residence and how it's also, it makes it feel like my whole life right now is sort of the residency. And that's changed the questions I'm asking and how I'm putting them into like scores or movement. I was just at a rehearsal for something completely different over the weekend, and I thought for about 5 hours that I had broken my foot. And it was like, wow, this is a big thing. But one of the scores we've been working with is notice life happening and stay with it. So it was really interesting to just apply the score to like, oh, I'm noticing my foot might be broken. And it's really not the end of anything. It's like life happening, and it can even fit in the score. I can figure out how to do this thing I'm doing with this because it's part of like, so it's I don't know, it creates this really holistic environment through which to even view my own life in sort of like a really large scale way of being in residency. Yeah, so very useful for like tons of things.
Yeah, your life is imitating your art in the moment. Awesome. Thank you, Janesta. You want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. Also to echo what Clary was saying, I feel like having what's been super invaluable for me has been the mentorship. I think for a while there, I feel like I've been working on art or art concepts very like siloed. And I feel like sometimes, there's aspects that I feel like there's aspects that I maybe wasn't looking at, or maybe different angles of the process that I was looking at that I wasn't seeing. And so being able to sort of externalize some of that thought process and, just for Deborah to be, like, have you thought of it from this way? Or have you thought about giving this task? Or have you thought about, reorienting this way? Has been super helpful and invaluable in me sort of kind of forming my process and building this piece. Also, I feel like, yeah, having that dedicated time to studio space. The space has been like so wonderful to work in, and I don't know, I feel like there's really an energy at Studio 210 where you can just create so much. Like I've been very surprised at the amount of work I've been able to generate with just like dedicating the time and space within the studio. And that's just been amazing to be a part of.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's what makes this residency really, really special is that combination of space and and mentorship, which is something that Deb and I often talk about. Like, how can we get more people to know about this? Because it's so exciting. Deb.
There's also something interesting about knowing that you have been given the time to do this. I think it orients you in a way that you don't usually orient yourself. You'll make a rehearsal, hey, you may show up, you might not. The rest of your life is in there, but this is like there's a deadline and you have this much amount of time, and it doesn't matter whether it's a finished product. So that's removed from it as a goal. So you don't need that pressure, but it's just like, oh, I came in here to do something. And I think it's almost like reorienting the brain.
Mhm.
And it does, I mean, I'm interested because one of you is working sort of neurologically based and in the body, and the other is working spiritually. And I think that combination is really interesting, but you're both having the same experience of going in and making things,
Mhm.
figuring it out. So the interesting parallels and opposite universes, or sides of the universe as it is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great, I think, transition to my next question. And this is for you, Deb. As you've worked with the residents and spoken to them and maybe seen some of their rehearsal, are there any ways that these projects intersect? And you sort of touched on that a little bit.
One of the most interesting things so far is that they both want to reorient the audience. And we haven't done that in the space. We've had things where there was a whole nother studio that I rent for people as their warm-up area, and one group turned that into a whole nother performance space. So there were two spaces. But pretty much everyone has done a traditional proscenium kind of orientation. So I'm very excited about this because I want to do it myself. So I get to watch them try it out and see how it works.
Yeah.
That was a surprise that both of you thought that was a cool idea. It feeds your perspective on what you're doing. And that's an interesting shared thing given how different the orientation of the pieces are.
Do either of you want to speak to why you've made that choice? Why you want to? So I think for those who might not understand, generally Deb's space is set up where there's the audience facing one direction and then there's a performance space. And I believe Janesta and Clary are hoping to put the audience more into what has traditionally been the performance space. And I'd love to hear from both of you about why you've made that choice or what you're hoping that elicits during the performance.
Janessa, would you like to take this one first?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I feel like I ultimately came to the decision of playing with the orientation of the audience because part of my aim for this piece is to transport the audience members into a ritual space. And when I think about ritual and when I think about bringing ritual to performance, I feel like sometimes when we are looking at performance, it's very like, these are the performers, these are the audience members are watching the performers, and there's kind of like this very distinct delineation between the two. And when I'm looking at ritual and when I'm doing ritual work, it's a communal act. And so I wanted to shift that with the orientation of the audience so that the audience would feel that they are a part of the ritual. They're not just witnessing, but they also are engaging in, and also through witnessing the movement and engaging with the art, they are also a part of the ritual. So I wanted to give more of an intimacy and sort of blur that line with the orientation being more in around versus the traditional proscenium.
Yeah, and then my kind of thought process around it is I'm planning on having the audience sort of evenly distributed throughout the stage space. So there is kind of no separation at all between like witnesses and performers. And it kind of was branching off from previous research I was doing with scent designs, like having like smells dispersed through the space when I didn't have the audience as intermingling, because it kind of created this texture or fabric that could fill a whole space and kind of bring everyone into a similar experience in their own like bodies that would elicit a response. Like there was just a lot of like response to smell that would be vocal or movement or looking around, and then the performers could kind of notice and bring that into their performance. And it was this really, really interesting fabric of feedback loops. But I'm not really wanting to use scent in this process just because there's more people in the audience. It doesn't feel, there's lots of things with scents and people who are sensitive. So it seemed like something I didn't want to bring in. So sort of as an alternative to create that kind of like in interdependent fabric was to just put the audience with us. And so there isn't any separation to begin with. And yeah, and just playing with a value that I have in all of the research of the kind of mutual witnessing. So a lot of time performers get witnessed disproportionately to the audience, and I want to kind of do away with that. At least try out doing away with that and just see what happens if the audience has the opportunity to be as witnessed by the performers as the performers do get witnessed by the audience. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. One of the questions from the chat, which I was also wondering if you could clarify, is are both of you working with a group, or are you choosing to do solo work?
That's a great question. Summer is an interesting time. People's lives are very full and busy. So I've been working with quite a few different people, like friends who are interested in the research, people I've done the research with. People will come in and leave, and then they're not in the process with me anymore. But I think that the sharing, I will have 2 or 3 collaborators showing with me. So it'll probably be 3 or 4 of us, hopefully.
We'll see how the summer goes.
Yeah, I actually will be working in a duet. So it will be myself and another dancer.
Great, thank you. And then another question from our chat is, are these new pieces or continuations of a previous work? And I know, Clary, we've sort of touched on, you're not creating a piece per se, like you're really interested in the research aspect of it. I think, Janesta, you might be forming more of a solid piece, I guess, for no other word to say it. But yeah, could you tell us a little bit about if this is new, is this continuing something that you've been interested in?
Yeah, this is definitely a continuation of stuff I've been working on. I recently did a like a 2-week choreo lab with Axis Dance Company, and that's when I initially started. We played with performing these scores, or like having this practice be in a performance setting or have a performance value. And that was just like last month. So pretty new continuation from that, but stuff I've been researching more so like by myself for the past 1.5 years, 2 years.
Yeah, this is a very new piece. It has been a concept that I have had an interest in wanting to play with, and kind of, yeah, the whole intent with bringing this idea and applying for Studio 210 was to be able to have the ability to, possibly form a foundation of movement to possibly and hopefully build on a larger piece.
Thank you. Deb, I want to know what you're seeing and what you're most excited about in the work that Clary and Janesta are creating. I know you love to do research and kind of play around and in kind of both of these spaces, I think, of like generating movement improvisationally as well as sort of creating these ritual spaces. So I would love to hear from you what you're
Well, it's
thinking.
interesting. I'm the science part of me coming out of my own family is always sort of underneath. If there's an idea, I'm curious to know what happens around it. So talking to Clary, it's been very interesting to just understand perspective on what she's trying to do. With Janesta's a writer also, and came in with a beautiful piece of writing that's very dense. And part of the conversation that's been fascinating for me is how you put the text on the piece so that you can hear it and see the movement. Because when you have really dense writing and then you put movement on top of it, how do you focus? How do you make the audience focus? What part of it do you want them to hear? What do you want them to see? I mean, those are the really interesting kind of problems coming up with that combination. And I just like the fact that their approaches are different. I mean, it's been very interesting for me as a person trying to think about how to approach these things. I don't know if that answered your question, actually.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. Thank you. It brings up for me thinking, you know, I know sometimes when I have to listen to something, I can't see it. And when I have to, when I'm trying to, so this kind of sensory overload. And that's also something I think that Clary,
yep.
you're considering, right? That what am I looking at? Where do I put my attention? So I'm excited to see it and experience it and see what that feels like as an audience member. Yeah, it
And it's
sounds.
interesting that one is intentionally looking at that, and the
Mhm.
other is it's an effect of having both of those things,
Yeah.
or having multiple stuff happening. I mean, you guys might want to talk to each other too about how you do this. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah. I mean, it means it makes me think about a piece that would have an arc where you would start at one end of it in terms of your relationship to it and how where it would land when it got down to the other end of it. It's
Mhm.
fascinating.
Yeah. Um, we're, I think we're sort of wrapping up a little bit here. Is there anything else that either of you would like to tell us about what we can expect at the performance, which again, I will reiterate is July 26th and 27th at Studio 210 in San Francisco? And maybe I shouldn't even say performance. This will be a chance for us to gather and observe and witness what Clary and Janesta have been researching and working on.
And I can say a little bit more about that in terms of the residency process.
Yeah, please.
I think one of the things about this, and it came from my own experience of going to Jurassic for a residency, which they'd call it the gift of time. And you don't have to do anything when you're there. You just have to be there without the rest of your life weighing on you. I can't quite remove them from their own lives in a way that makes it that easy or that isolating. But what we're interested in giving people space to create, to think about things they want to think about that they might not have had time to, or to just think about something that may have no bearing on anything and show up some, years down the road, but it's just time to think about stuff with the idea that they just talk about what they've been doing at the end. So it can be a performance, it can be a series of tasks that they solved, it can be ideas they've been thinking about, the performers talk. If there's a composer, they can talk. I mean, any collaborators can talk. So, and for me, the grand finale to this is the performances, because that's when the choreographers get to ask the audience the questions that they have about their work. And it's a real conversation. There's an hour for the performances and there's an hour for the conversation so that people can actually go in depth on both sides to talk about the work. And it's to me that is so luxurious. And I just had this conversation yesterday because we watched a show and it had a Q&A, and the videographers who work with us in the studio said our Q&A has changed their perspective on what that can be, because it's a real conversation about making work. And I think that is the bonus of this, is that you actually, the audience gets to ask the performers questions also, and it often goes where there's two different audiences and they get to hear how the other people work, and you begin to weave the whole communities together and understand how things happen, because a lot of times people just think, oh, you had a full house, you must have paid your bills, how great. It's like not even close. So let's talk about why this person is doing this work, and we get into that really deeply. So I'm very excited for the conversations you guys will have with your audiences.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think what was the question you asked? It was what people can expect
Yeah,
or
anything else you want to tell us about what we can expect in this
um
moment?
got it. Yeah, I think well, it's been really interesting too being in a creative process just as a seemingly like kind of siloed point of focus in the context of the world. And it's been interesting and talking to Deb about these things too, but just like the more, I don't know, sort of trivial the thing I'm doing feels sometimes, the more clarity I get on what's important to me in it. So I think even just kind of absolving myself from like, oh, this is the offering I have for the audience, and like this is what people can expect. It's more just like being in process right now makes me feel very, very confident that what I'm doing is very important to me, because otherwise it would fall away. It wouldn't be continuing. Yeah, and so yeah, I have no idea what is going to happen. I don't even know who's going to be showing with me right now, and I like that it feels like this thing I can just be with, that is part of the process and is part of life, and the unknown and all the scary things. And this is just sort of like a little case study for how to be human in that and be with the people who are there with me, and people who come to be there with us, as an audience or as a witness. So that's sort of generally how I'm feeling and thinking about it right now. But it feels really good. Surprisingly, like it feels like a really good way to focus my thought and emotions and energy right now. So
It's great. That's so needed.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not sure if I even want to give the audience expectation. I feel like a lot of the conversations Deborah and I have been having around sort of releasing my own self as an artist from the expectation of needing to have something finished and put together and like, you know, a whole collective piece. I think because the subject matter that I'm touching on is so very layered, I want to believe that there are multiple touch points for the audience to grab onto. And definitely part of my, I think, big tasks is creating space for the audience to be able to grab onto those multiple layers and the multiple ways that I can using the mediums that I have. But yeah, I kind of, in freeing myself from the expectation, I kind of want to free the audience from the expectation as well.
Awesome. Yeah. That's great.
I wanted to say one thing that you guys should think about if you want to say anything to the audience ahead of time about how to receive this, or if you want to talk about the fact that you want to release their expectations. And you can say that afterwards too, but if you want to either write that in the program or say something about that, just something to think about.
Thank you. Yeah, I am seeing another question from the chat that says, I have loved this. Will each evening have both performers? And I can answer that. Yes, we will get a chance to see and witness both Janesta and Clary's works on both nights, and questions, and have conversation with them on both nights. So that's very exciting. And I love that, you know, if you come both nights, you're going to see different things, especially from Clary. I think you're going to experience something completely different. I mean, I guess that's the nature of live performance, but especially with an improvisational score. Well, thank you so much. This has been great. I can't wait to see these works in just a few weeks. So to reiterate, please join us on the residency performance July 26th and 27th at 7 p.m. in Studio 210. We'll see the culmination of each residence project and have a final discussion and feedback session with the audience. The performance will have limited in-person tickets. We only sell 34 tickets, so please get them soon. And will also be live streamed, so you can watch it from the comfort of your home, although it's not the same, I promise. Come to the studio. You can reserve a ticket for either viewing format by going to the link that we'll post in the chat. And thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you all for being here, and I look forward to seeing you all in person soon. Have a good one.
thank you.
Thank you.